On April 27th, 1992, a small little game was released for a very popular handheld system, the Game Boy. This game was called Kirby's Dreamland. Masahiro Sakurai and Hal Laboratory developed the game for the handheld. It was designed to be a simple and easy to pick up platformer for players who have little to no experience with 2D platformers. Its simple and easy to understand gameplay gave rise to what is now a very popular franchise. The Kirby franchise is just about over 30 years old, with many mainline platformers and spin-offs. And although Kirby Dreamland has a very important role to play in that, I'd say its sequel, Kirby's Adventure on the NES, is the main reason why Kirby is so popular till this day. Kirby's Adventure was released on March 23rd, 1993 in Japan, and May 1993 for Northern American audiences. It came pretty late in the NES's lifespan, which went until 1995 in the US. You may be asking why I'm starting with Adventure and not Dreamland. Well, for one, I don't think the first game has enough for like a full video, but I will cover it with Dreamland 2 and 3 later on. And also, I just never played it. The game takes place in a world called Dreamland. And look, I'm gonna say dream a lot, so you're just gonna have to deal with it. The Fountain of Dreams, a fountain that creates dreams for all the people in Dreamland. That was a sentence I just said. King Dedede, the self-proclaimed King of Dreamland. The fucking asshole decides to bathe in the Fountain of Dreams. Also, the dipshit broke the Star Rod. The Star Rod is an artifact that creates magic that flows into the fountain. But now that it's broken, no one in Dreamland can dream. This causes Kirby to wake up and go to the Fountain of Dreams, which starts Kirby's adventure. The graphics are very detailed for an NES game. I talked about how I don't really like the color palette of Super Mario Bros. 3, and most NES games in general, but Kirby is an exception to that. Kirby and the other enemies have such a simple design, it really helps the background stand out compared to other games on the console. The backgrounds are full of color and detail. Most NES games feel very abstract or boring. Plain, boring blue or black backgrounds, maybe a few clouds, and I get it. The NES is far from a powerful console, and most developers obviously focused on gameplay. In fact, copy abilities weren't in Kirby's Dreamland, only being able to throw out stars after inhaling something. Not all the enemies in the game give you an ability, but quite a few do, and in total we have 25 copy abilities. Technically 26, but we'll get to that later. We have Backdrop, Ball, Beam, Crash, Cutter, Fire, Fireball, Freeze, Hammer, High Jump, Ice, Laser, Light, Mic, Mix, Sleep, Spark, Star Rod, Stone, Sword, Throw, Tornado, UFO, and Wheel. Honestly, this is super impressive for such a small game. But let's get into the positives and negatives. Abilities like Fire and Beam can kill many enemies in front of you. Fire and Spark are just good ways to killing enemies around you, although it does feel like some abilities just should be like together. Fire and Fireball, Freeze and Ice, Backdrop and Throw, all of these abilities should go together, but aren't for some reason. Then there are some okay ones like Stone, Wheel, High Jump, Tornado, and Hammer. These powers are okay, but are more substantial compared to some others. Then there's Ball, which does not do shit. And then there's Sword. Even from the beginning of the series, there's always been some amount of favorism towards this ability. The fact that you get a unique attack in the air puts it as one of the best abilities. Also, swords are really cool, and I am very biased. Overall, I really like how the copy abilities are utilized in this game. The amount of unique ways you can use these powers to find secrets and make fights easier, as well as just using them in general, makes them just incredibly fun to use. The standard game in general is also just really fun. Kirby himself can jump an infinite amount of times, and you'd think that would make him OP as shit. Although you can just fly over most of the stages, I wouldn't really recommend that. For one, it's extremely slow. You might as well just run through the levels normally because it's faster. Speaking of OP, I want to talk about the biggest thing about this game. Its difficulty. Kirby's Adventure is not a hard game. It's a game made for babies! But just because the game is made for younger audiences doesn't mean it has no value to older players. The fact that it's so easy makes it kind of hard for more experienced players, because the amount of times I died or got hit is kind of embarrassing, to be honest. The difficulty of the game honestly fluctuates depending on what copy ability you're using, especially when it comes to the bosses. There are a lot of bosses and mini-bosses in this game, varying in difficulty and quality, and some of them provide a very decent challenge, and there are some that can get very annoying and tedious, and there are some that can be extremely cheesed, and most of it is based on what power you use against each enemy. Not every boss is bad or easy. Motherfucking Meta Knight. This asshole constantly keeps showing up, and he keeps sending his lackeys to kill you throughout the game. And now, you can finally have a one-on-one duel. You know, nothing happens if you pick up the sword. Like, I waited there for a while, and nothing happens. He's just waiting for you to pick it up. So, the fight. It's okay, I guess. It's a decent skill check for the player, and gives me more evidence that the developers were extremely biased towards the sword ability. To be honest, I really only liked this fight because it had a pretty good build-up throughout the game, and who and what Meta Knight will become later in these games, and also how the fight ends. But at the end of the day, he is still probably the second best boss. Now, I think there's a big reason for why this game is so special. Its charm and presentation. This game's just so fucking cute, man. Kirby's little dance at the end of every stage and every boss. They even have little animations when transitioning through worlds. It's all so fucking adorable. There's also a few mini games outside of the main levels. Quick Draw. You shoot your opponent before they can shoot you. You can get all their hats if you kill them all. Egg Catcher. DDD throws eggs and bombs at you, with the player needing to catch as many eggs as you can without eating any of the bombs. After going through the 7 worlds, you finally make it to the Fountain of Dreams. We face off against King Dedede. After kicking his ass, he pleads with us not to bring the Star Rod back to the fountain. So it turns out that Dedede wasn't that much of a bad guy. You see, a being called Nightmare took control of the Fountain of Dreams so he could take over Dreamland. To prevent this, Dedede decided to destroy the Star Rod and spread it all over the world so Nightmare couldn't obtain its power. But now, because of us, Nightmare reappears and successfully steals the power of the Fountain of Dreams. And now, we move to the final boss. The final copy ability is the Star Rod. We use it to shoot stars at Nightmare in this bullet hell section. He also shoots stars back at you in multiple different variations. Some of the patterns are kind of bullshit, but it's still pretty fun. And then we end with the second phase on the moon. It's without a doubt the best boss in the game. The Star Rod works just like in the first phase, but now it has a small hitbox when jumping. Nightmare flies all over the screen, teleporting around and shooting stars at you. He's also invincible most of the time, but a lot of his attacks do leave him open for you to get a hit on him. The fight is really fun, but I'm extremely disappointed that all of the other bosses before this one were extremely underwhelming. Once we finally beat Nightmare, we see the moon get a hole blown in it as Kirby flies away. Meeting up with Dedede, the two part ways, as Kirby returns the Star Rod to the fountain, which ends Kirby's adventure. I really like this game. It's charming, its controls are so much smoother than most NES games. The music's pretty catchy, and the graphics and backgrounds are very impressive for a game on this system. Aside from the slowdown, the weak bosses, and a few shitty powers, I'd say this game is pretty damn good. A 7 out of 10 for me describes this game, although I will say the series gets substantially better later on. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, thank you for watching, and see you next time.